Do you like big electric balls? What about fast exploding balls? Or floating blue balls? Or pairs of balls that go together? Well, then I've got a pack for you. That's right, today we're talking about Ode Tempest. This used to be one of Soulframe's 2 starting packs, but in Preludes 9 it was moved to the faction shops of both Alka's Children and the Silent Rose. You need rank 5 in one of those factions just to be able to buy Ode Tempest, and then another 3,000 standing to actually afford it. Now, even with the latest changes in Preludes 10, faction reputation is a pretty hefty grind, so we've got to ask ourselves, is it worth it? Yes it is. I'm going to show you a build just because I like Buildcraft, but let me be clear right from the start. Ode Tempest is so strong, you're going to be fine no matter how you build it. That said, what's good can always be better, so let's take a deep dive into how Ode Tempest works and how we can get the most out of what it offers. Ode Tempest's abilities are balls, literally. The first one is called Sizemore, and it rolls out like a bowling ball, pushing back enemies and dealing damage until it explodes. The tick damage from the roll increases the longer the ball rolls, and this duration scales with Spirit. The amount of damage done by the final explosion scales with Courage, and the explosion has a radius that scales with Grace. This does have radial drop-off, so you need enemies to be in close range to get the full force of the blast. The biggest issue with Sizemore is how it interacts with objects. This ball really wants to keep on rolling. It passes through structures like walls and tents, but keeps rolling in a straight line over terrain. Bisulcams are a curious exception here, as the ball neither rolls over them nor passes through them, and will instead explode immediately on impact. Otherwise, the ball is extremely dedicated to rolling forward for its full duration, to the point that it will roll straight up the side of a cliff. While this is deeply entertaining, it does make Sizemore the weakest of Ode Tempest's 3 abilities, not because it isn't useful or doesn't deal enough damage, but because it's the hardest ability to use effectively. Because the ball has different rules for collision than the enemies you fight, your targets can get caught on objects while the ball keeps on rolling, meaning they don't take all or sometimes even any of the final explosion damage. You can lessen this effect by intentionally building for short durations, but even setting aside the fact that you will want duration for your other abilities, trading duration for ease of use is not worthwhile. The roll damage can be pretty impressive with high duration, and you can get the damage tick and the explosion with a well-aimed ball. Ode Tempest's second ability is Astrosphere. This will set a ball hovering at a fixed spot, creating a massive green sphere. The size of the sphere does scale with Grace, but even on a build without much Grace, your sphere will be quite large. Enemies within the sphere when you cast it, or entering the sphere after you cast it, will take damage that scales with your Courage. They will also receive a debuff that causes them to take about 4 times more damage from all attacks. The sphere and the debuff have independent durations that scale with Spirit, meaning if an enemy enters your sphere right before its duration ends, they will still have the debuff for its full duration. Since enemies keep the debuff after they leave the sphere, you can use your Sizemore to roll through enemies in your sphere, and they will continue to take 4 times as much damage from the roll ticks and the final explosion even if they get pushed out of the sphere. And because this is a debuff that causes enemies to take more damage rather than being a buff that causes you to deal more damage, Astrosphere will effectively increase DPS for your whole party if you're playing in a group. The sphere centers around the hovering ball you place when you cast the ability. You can aim the ball right at your feet if you want the sphere to center on your position, or aim it at a spot on the ground, but this has a fixed maximum range. Can you imagine if you could cast the sphere at long range and shoot into it? With a spirit buff? Astrosphere's debuff does not apply to bosses, and at least some bosses take only half of its initial damage proc. Its cooldown won't start until after the sphere has expired, so it's not possible to have more than one sphere at a time, or to get 100% uptime on your own sphere. It's still a very strong ability though, and as you'll see, it gets even better. Ode Tempest's final ability is Atmosphere, a little blue ball that hovers over your shoulder and protects you from attacks. That's right, attacks. This ball will negate not just incoming damage, but stagger and status effects too. It makes you completely immune to everything for a number of attacks that scales with your Courage, and will stick around until all those attacks have been denied, or for a duration that scales with Spirit. And if full immunity isn't enough to impress you, Atmosphere will also deal stagger to enemies when they hit you. This little ball is crazy strong. Like Astrosphere, Atmosphere won't start its cooldown until the ball disappears, so you can't have it up all the time. But that's okay, because it still gets better. When you cast Atmosphere, you create a ball not just for yourself, but for allies within range when you cast it. This range scales with grace, but it's only necessary to be in that range when the ability is cast. After that, allies can go wherever they like, and the ball will travel with them for its full duration or until its maximum hits have been used up. So yeah, Ode Tempest is really strong, right? And yet it gets even better! If you have Atmosphere active while standing within Astrosphere's range, you'll see the two balls link up as they synergize with one another. If an enemy hits you while this link is active, the attack they would have done to you gets converted into an AoE damage proc. Yes, the full attack, status effects and all. And that's how you get clips like this. So yeah, Ode Tempest is extremely strong. It synergizes both with itself and with other packs, and its base range, power, and durations are good enough that you can use it with whatever weapons and virtues you like, and it will still be incredibly strong. So how can we build this pack to be even better? Ode Tempest's only weakness is its cooldowns, so to get some cooldown reduction, we're going to build for Smite. This starts with our weapon arts. Smite is Soulframe's alternative to critical hits, so making an enemy vulnerable to Smite is a random chance with odds based on your weapon. This build is going to use lots of courage and spirit with almost no grace, so you want to pick a main weapon that is attuned to either courage or spirit and has a good Smite chance. For long blades, your options are Vetch, Solos, and Wulder. Solos has a very slightly higher Smite chance than the other two, and Wulder has the least damage, but all three will give you good results. For polearms, your best choices are Dukalik and Gethanan. If you want to use a shield, it would have to be Aura Number, and main weapon short blades would have to be the Royal Times, because all other options for both are grace attuned. Combat arts for these 4 weapon types are going to be pretty similar when it comes to this specific build. You just want to upgrade the Smite enhancing arts that fit your playstyle, with your options being Smite, Vaunt, Pointed Greeting, Salted Blade, Final Blow, and Misdirection. If you go for Salted Blade on polearms, make sure you also take Thrown Off so you can knock enemies prone. For bow, we want to use Blitzel even though Juniper's Smite chance is higher, because we really don't want to put points into grace on this build. Bows have a few arts that increase your chance of Smite, but none of them are particularly great. Wolf's Eye should be my favorite since I almost always use charged shots, but even with it fully upgraded, Smites don't proc often enough for how slowly shots charge. You could go for Salted Blade, but even with my leg, knocking enemies down is a bit unreliable, and then the Smite proc is again too low for the amount of time it takes to get enemies prone in the first place. Bow also has Riposte and Vaunt, but bow parries are awkward both conceptually and in terms of how the controls feel. I personally do not enjoy playing this way, especially now that we have sidearms, which are a much better option for close-range combat. I hope DE replaces these nodes eventually, since there are some other arts bows really need. Anyway, the most reliable way to proc Smite with a bow is Hail of Arrows. Since the combat arts that increase the chance of Smite are so mediocre, we're better off just maximizing the number of hits, so the important arts here are Fletching and Rife Knocked. The sheer quantity of hits is going to numerically increase your chance of getting a Smite, even if the chance for each individual hit remains the same, and this is much more efficient than any of the bow Smite arts. For magic weapons, both Gwilyn and Odiak have the same Smite chance, so you can use either one successfully. Our only Smite-enhancing arts are Smite and Misdirection, and you won't have enough arts to take both. Smite is definitely much easier to use, but Spectre Strikes with Odiak are a lot of fun, so this too can be a matter of personal preference. No matter what you choose for your main weapon, Flyblades are going to be the better option when it comes to sidearms. Not only will their orbit do more damage thanks to Astrosphere, but the Twist of Luck combat art is going to be a fantastic source of Smite. If you can get Precles, that's obviously the better choice, but even Skilter is worth using despite its grace attunement. Those orbiting blades will hit enough times that your Smite chance effectively skyrockets. For packed upgrades, we want to max out Mora's Pride and Iridis's Favor to buff all of our packed abilities, and then max Akin for cooldown reduction. After that, we want to max out Sympathy, because our only vulnerability on this build will be when our abilities are on cooldown. Getting a free heal here will cover this one weak point very nicely. For virtues, you'd want to put all of your points into Courage and Spirit. I like to make them equal, since you want to get a good duration for your Astrosphere debuff and Sizemore roll, but you also want Courage for Atmos negations and Sizemore explosion damage. This is really up to preference though, since these abilities are going to be strong no matter what. Using this build is very easy. Cast your Atmosphere first, then your Astrosphere, since your Astrosphere will probably run out first even if you cast it last. Aim your Sizemore away from objects so enemies take the full roll damage, and always have your Flyblades orbiting for extra damage and Smite procs. If anything is still alive when your balls drop, parry and riposte until they're off cooldown, or until you get the Smite you need to refresh them. Try to save Atmosphere for when your Astra is up, but with Atmos lasting so much longer than Astra, it's going to be tough to keep them in sync all the time, and you'll be just fine if you use them both immediately off cooldown, especially when you're getting lots of smites. So yes, Ode Tempest is absolutely worth the faction grind it takes to get it. That grind is pretty rough, but I think it's appropriate for a pact this strong to be a rank 5 reward. It's kind of wild to think that this used to be a starting pact. Even if you prefer the abilities or aesthetics of other packs, you're still going to want Ode Tempest every now and then because it is hands down the best pact for leveling up a weapon you don't like. Atmosphere's protection makes Soulframe combat way more forgiving, and it can help you learn the timing for things like parry and perfect dodge. In that sense, I can kind of see how it makes a little sense as a starting pact, but it's still way too powerful to be that easy to get, in my opinion anyway. What do you think? Is it fairly priced where it is? Should it get swapped with one of the starting packs? Or does it need a nerf? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Ode Tempest, please consider helping out my channel with a like or a subscribe. Good luck on your faction grind, may the balls float ever in your favor, and until next time, happy hunting!